Hey guys, welcome to part 2 on how to play S-Victreebel, Deoxys Defense, and Bastiodon. In this video, I'll be just going over some very specific scenarios to really help you play this specific team. So in Pokemon Go, there's a couple different ways your game can go just based off of the lead alone. You can either win the lead and win the switch, you can lose the lead and then win the switch, or you can lose the lead and lose the switch. And all three scenarios, they're all different. You have to play them differently. The win the lead, win the switch scenario is usually generally pretty rock paper scissory. If you keep countering all of their Pokemon, you're just gonna win the game. It doesn't really matter. I think you all know how to play that kind of game. So I did want to show you a couple examples of each of these scenarios. So without further ado, let's get going. In this first scenario, it is kind of a win the lead, win the switch, where I have a very favorable lead here. S-Victreebel versus Stunfisk, and they swap out into Meganium. Meganium has a pretty neutral matchup with S-Victreebel, I would say, but the main reason I switch or stay in is because the other two do not have a good very very good matchup versus Meganium. And the main advantage, this is always favorable if you can stay in versus their switch and just razor leaf them down with S-Victreebel, is that you'll have full knowledge of their lineup because they're going to swap in their third Pokemon here. So now what you have to do is you have to realize what your MVP of the game is going to be and what your dead weight is. And immediately I realize, hey, this is Registeel and Stunfisk. Bastiodon is completely useless. Normally you would never swap a Bastiodon into a loaded Registeel. Focus Blast 4 times, super effective, huge nuke, almost KOs Bastiodon right off the bat, and he makes a swap out here. I don't know why I go for the Stone Edge. I should have went for Flamethrower because it's not resisted, but either way, the point here is my Bastiodon was going to be completely useless, so I knew this game wasn't quite over yet. This is still going to be quite a tough game, even though I won the lead and technically won the switch. So S-Victreebel comes back in, very favorable lead against Stunfisk, but that's at a neutral energy scenario. If Stunfisk has some extra energy, you can see that I actually do have to burn a shield here, but after that it's all Razor Leafs. Actually, using the Stone Edge almost cost me the win there, but I come in against this Registeel, and now my Victreebel can Razor Leaf down if he does not go for lockdowns or lock-ons, but I do elect to switch. I threw the Leaf Blade so that he would only have one shield left. All I have to do is make it do Psycho Boost now, but he's probably going to go down to counters before that. So I thought this was just a good example of once you do win the lead, is the game's not over. You need to realize who your MVP is and who your least valuable player is. In this next clip, we are going to see an example of a Registeel lead. So this is something that you might not see as often in the future, just due to the Registeel nerfs that were handed out today to Flash Cannon and Focus Blast. But as you can see here, even though everything is resisted by Registeel, just because all of his damage is from charge moves, you can actually do pretty well in this matchup. Right now, like before pre-nerf, it was very IV dependent and very lag dependent. So if I drop a fast move, you can no longer win the matchup, and you leave that matchup with 2 shields down. And I saw some lag there, so I swap into my Deoxys to finish him off. I didn't want to chance it. As I said, the effects are pretty averse if you do end up losing that Registeel match, because they're down. They only use 1 shield, you use 2 shields, and they have switch advantage on their team. And this team absolutely needs switch advantage to function. So yeah, you can see they swap into the Azumarill. Honestly, this is a pretty decent matchup for Deoxys as well. You can see I try and bait the shield with Psycho Boost, but he doesn't buy it. In the next video, in part 3, I'll detail the Deoxys versus Azumarill matchup quite a bit more, because it is a very important one. It's probably the most common Pokemon you'll get swapped into your Deoxys defense as a safe swap. But they have a Shadow Zapdos in the back, and as when they usually have a Registeel and Azumarill, Bastiodon usually can take care of the third Pokemon. They'll be running an Altaria or Shadow Zapdos or something like that. So once again, just showing how you can win with a Registeel lead. You just really need to be able to play around the fact that you'll have no shields after that, though. So next game, we're going to look at a scenario where you lose the lead, and you have a matchup where you can possibly win the switch back. So this is the Deoxys Defense Asmero matchup that I was talking about earlier. This matchup is kind of interesting. You got to throw Thunderbolts until at least one goes through. That is for sure. And if they shield, obviously match their shields. They Hydro Pump. If they Hydro Pump, you outpace them. If they Ice Beam, it's a lot closer. So you have to be careful for that. But look, they shield again, so they're down 2 shields. And now I know they're shieldless versus Thunderbolt, so I'm down 2 shields too, and he's gonna Hydro Pump again. So yeah, I'm definitely outpacing this guy. I've got you a Thunderbolt, and he's gonna be real low HP. I know I just need a Psycho Boost, and unfortunately his Ice Beam does not charge as fast as my Psycho Boost, just 5 counters. And I know this is gonna weaken me going into the next matchup, but that's not the point of Deoxys Defense. It's not to carry you through this entire game. He's just used as a pivot to try and win you back switch advantage or lessen the blow of an awful lead like Altaria versus Victreebel or Skarmory versus Victreebel. So you can see Shadow Hypno comes back in, but guess what? I've won switch advantage. Shadow Hypno doesn't have to be versus my Victreebel anymore. And Shadow Hypno normally runs Ice Punch, Thunder Punch. So if you... there's probably no Focus Blast. In this case, I was getting ready to swap to Shadow Victreebel because I was pretty sure he'd switch out, but Shadow Ninetales comes in, and this might be one of the spiciest picks I've seen in a while. I actually didn't know what moves it was, so I couldn't chance just farming it down. Just throw the Stone Edge. I have no idea what it has, and my opponent GG's out. So in this example, I think this is another older example of an unfavorable lead, so incredibly unfavorable, and then having an opportunity to win the switch. So Altaria, there's an Altaria in the game, having switch advantage is extremely important. Like Victreebel, 4 times resisted by Altaria, but Altaria's moves or charge moves 4 times resisted by Bastiodon. So it's completely night and day on which Pokemon you get to match up with the Altaria. In this case, you can see Deoxys Defense does not really have like a great matchup versus Meganium, but sometimes you can win back switch advantage. You notice I charged all the way up to nearly 100 before throwing Psycho Boost, and I'm throwing a counter in between each Psycho Boost. And he's trying to farm me down really greedily. The reason I threw before I hit 100 is because I didn't want to have to waste a shield before throwing. So I was counting and making sure that I threw before he got to his second Frenzy Plant, which would KO me. But in this case, he finally throws his energy. He has a little bit more. He probably could have got another shield off me. But the point is that I now have switch advantage back. And Victreebel versus Toxicroak. It's not that favorable a matchup, but if you spend a shield, you win the matchup. And I absolutely cannot have Toxicroak going against Bastiodon with 2 extremely favorable moves. And here we have the very standard, very easy farm down of Altaria. You never have to use a shield. Doesn't matter how much energy they have. Never have to use any charge. Actually, don't use your charge moves ever on Altaria, I would say. Unless it's you win the game by using them. Because, yeah, you'll come out of this matchup with pretty much full energy. That's pretty much 2 charge moves. Bastiodon's charge moves are no joke. Like, if Toxicroak comes back in, I'm pretty sure a Flamethrower might KO at that point even. So that's not a big worry. Okay. In this case, I think we're going to explore what happens when you lose the lead and then you have an unwinnable switch as well. And these games are obviously a lot harder. Most teams can't come back from them very often. This team is the same. It's based on switch advantage. So if you fail to win back switch advantage, it's very tough. So you see Altaria stays in, throws the Sky Attack, and switches out to Seeking. So I don't really know the matchup this well, but I am pretty sure that it is not winnable at this point if he shields the Thunderbolt, which he does. So he shields the Thunderbolt, and he's farming me down. And the problem is, I know this is an icy win. So even if I shield and try and take him down, my attack is lowered already. So Seeking comes in. I can't even switch to Bastiodon to farm down. So I have to go to a Victreebel. So my switch timer is almost up. And I swap to Bastiodon. If I had swapped a bit faster, this match could have gone a little bit better, and you'll probably see why here. So the Registeel comes in, obviously not very favorable. I realize at this point what has to happen is my Victreebel needs to get to a Sludge Bomb to take this Altaria down. Leaf Blades, 4 times resisted, just aren't going to cut it. Razor Leafs obviously aren't going to cut it, so I'm not shielding, and I don't think my opponent doesn't read the situation the same way. He throws Flash Cannon when Focus Blast could just take me out and probably won the game at that point. But I go back and I get a Flamethrower off, which is actually kind of big. Getting quite a bit of damage done, and I have a lot of shields here, but he managed to farm me down. I know he's going to have a charge move coming out, but I get the Razor Leaf off. Unfortunately, my Victreebel's at such low HP because I swapped so slowly, but I know their Altaria is coming back out. I get the Sludge Bomb off, and no shields. The Sludge Bomb does a lot of damage, but not quite enough to KO, and we are going to go down to the wire, and I'm going to lose. But that just shows the situation was a bit winnable. I think I did lose a fast move as well, and I forgot to throw my my charge move on Deoxys, but it is what it is. Sometimes you just make mistakes. Here's another example of a really bad lead. So what I do is I swap out to Deoxys Defense as usual, but I think this Altaria calls my bluff a little bit and stays in, and this is pretty common too. I'm actually gonna misplay this situation. So what I'm doing is I'm just countering, and I don't throw a charge move for some reason. So he obviously throws his energy, and I die with a bunch of energy. The main issue with this, like, I don't mind if my Deoxys Defense dies and Altaria's at that much HP, is that my switch timer isn't up yet. And charge moves are really good for delaying switch timer. But I think that he's scared of switching out because our switch timers will be out of sync, and I'll be able to kind of follow him later, kind of giving me switch advantage. So he stays in order to keep switch advantage. So this is kind of technically an example of losing lead, losing switch, because my Deoxys Defense like lost the switch. He fainted. But this scenario will happen quite a bit. You'll usually throw a charge move, and the Altaria will be around half HP instead. But in comes Azu, and because I've farmed down this Altaria, I have almost 2 full Stone Edges, so I'll throw the next Stone Edge. And at this point, it's kind of like a rotation game. You kind of have to try and out-pivot them. It's nice if Bastiodon can farm down the other opponent first, but in this case, we have Ferrothorn. So Ferrothorn doesn't really do much damage to Victreebel, but I'm 4 times resisted as well. And they actually go for the bait, which I call. I realized that at that point, that is my only possible win condition, is if they bait there, because I need my shields for Bastiodon. So what's happening here is I'm just throwing charge moves to kind of bring down the clock, and after I shield this charge move, we're both very low, but switch timer's back up. So I can either try and go for the Ferrothorn. I'm very scared he's going to get to a Power Whip here. So I swap to the Bastiodon, and out comes Azu. And honestly, this is not too bad of a situation for me, because Azu is going to have to blow energy to take down Bastiodon. No undercharging or anything there. Bastiodon's just down. And I need to be able to take this Azu down without using Leaf Blade, because this Leaf Blade needs to come in and KO the Ferrothorn. So as you can see, if you do lose the lead and lose the switch, you either have to be able to pivot your team around the switch timer, or you have to be able to set up a farming scenario for one of your Pokemon to kind of give your Pokemon that advantage that it needs to take down that other Pokemon. Like, for example, Bastiodon loses to Azu, but Bastiodon, after farming down a full Altaria with 2 Stone Edges pretty much ready, doesn't lose to Azu anymore. So it's all about setting yourself up for those situations and kind of trapping the opponent there. Unfortunately, I didn't have any recent footage of that second example. There just wasn't a lot of Azu save switches that I ran into this season, unfortunately. But But yeah, coming up in part 3, I'm gonna go into some very specific individual matchups. You kind of saw some more like gameplay scenarios here. It'll be like, what do you do if you're Victreebel versus Registeel, or what do you do if you're Victreebel versus Deoxys defense? Kind of deal. Just more into the individual Pokemon gameplay, and then a little bit about what some more of my subjective thoughts of what maybe some replacements are. If you don't have a Shadow Victreebel, or if you don't have a Deoxys defense or Bastiodon, like what can you use in that spot to kind of achieve a very similar team with similar matchups and similar gameplay, where you can apply some of the stuff you've learned maybe in part 2.